Have right.
Yeah, I actually what if they were going to widen it? Well, no, he didn't.
You all at the bottom?
Yeah.
Turn this a little bit so the board can see this. Important for us to see. Good? Yes.
If you're good, I'm good.
You might need to adjust the camera though.
Ready? Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the September 18th meeting of the Village Board. This is our monthly meeting. Most of you are joining us for discussion related to the proposed Fjord Trail tonight. And as such, that item's been placed at the top. That said, the purpose of our meeting, our monthly meeting, is to hear reports from our departments and standing boards and to keep villagers abreast of our work. So that's still the primary focus of our session tonight, and I'm going to ensure that we have sufficient time to take up the standard business of the village as well. Okay, so tonight's discussion of the Fjord Trail is a discussion among the trustees.
So, before you proceed to the Fjord Trail, I do have one item.
Oh, you would like to modify the agenda?
I would like to modify.
The clerk is requesting a modification to the agenda, and it's simply adding a particular discussion under the accountant's report. He would like to ask us about getting surplus vehicles out to auction. Everybody okay with adding that?
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you for the reminder. Otherwise, no changes. Okay. So tonight's discussion is a discussion among the trustees, consisting primarily of a timeline and report on a series of meetings in various configurations among the executive officers of the Phillipstown municipalities, John Van Tassel, Town Supervisor, Mayor Chris Winward of Nelsonville, and myself. The staff and the board of HHFT, or particular members, and New York State Parks officials. I'll then summarize correspondence related to those meetings. The trustees will then have a discussion based on that information. I'm going to make a proposal for next steps, and the trustees will discuss and we'll determine if we're going to take public comment based on our standing policy for public comment. We do take a vote at each meeting regarding public comment. Since taking office as mayor, I've attended any number of meetings and discussions with these entities. That's the job of the executive officer of the municipality. As with all other issues, negotiations, and contracts, final determinations are subject to the board. I report and update final determinations, and make recommendations, and I ask my board colleagues to vote on actions to be taken. Often we agree, sometimes we don't, right? That's the point of democracy, to have a range of views at the table. And the same is true for Supervisor Van Tassel and Supervisor Winward. I have long been a supporter of the Fjord Trail as a necessary means to ensure safe passage out of the village to trailheads, safer and rationalized parking, and as an alternative venue for those not willing or able to make some of the more rigorous climbs in the Highlands. I understood from the earliest days of discussion that the trail was intended to solve problems, including overcrowding and existing deficiencies in Cold Springs visitation, resources, and infrastructure. My understanding of the goals of the trail developers has shifted, particularly since the spring. In that time, inconsistencies and even grave errors were revealed by the work of the data committee. Right on cue. Hello, James. The rollout of the alternative route analysis by HHFT designers demonstrated a clear bias toward the lead donor's preferred pathway, beginning at Dockside. Visualizations of the trail built at scale via any route in the village itself gave me pause about the outsized physical impact it will have on the livability of our residential community. My colleagues at the executive level in Phillipstown, Superintendent Tassel and Mayor Winward, share my concerns, and we have been voicing them in our regular meetings with parks officials and HHFT representatives. We felt we were not being heard and even having our concerns dismissed by the developer state agency. Neither the town nor the villages has any permitting authority over the fjord trail proposed on state land. However, as fiduciaries of our municipalities and stewards of our quality of life, it is our job as executives and as individual board members to take the hard look at a project's impact and advocate on behalf of our residents and taxpayers. It's our job to think about financial implications, infrastructure strains, livability, and yes, the very real impacts of over-tourism that are being felt and resisted in destinations all across the globe. In late April, the supervisor, the mayor, and I wrote to state parks documenting our concerns about the fjord trail coming at full scale into the village by any route. We made clear our particular concern that a waterborne route emanating from Dockside would become a tourist destination in and of itself, and particularly a draw for car-bound visitors, who, by HHFT's own data, are the greatest numbers of arrivals in the village and at trailheads. That letter has not yet been answered by state parks. Following our letter, tensions rose in the community and a fury of PR was pushed out by HHFT's paid team. Supervisor Van Tassel asked for a meeting with HHFT Board Chair Chris Davis, and he's also the lead project donor. John met with Chris first on April 29th. In a second session on May 11th, the mayors joined the supervisor in a session with Mr. Davis and HHFT board member Fred Rich. We all agreed to invite former Phillipstown Supervisor Bill Mazuka, as he is known and trusted by both groups. After arranging conversation, we reached several informal agreements with recognition that any determinations would have to be made by our constituent boards individually. These concepts included construction of supporting amenities to draw trail visitors north of the village, including the Duchess Manor and nearby parking lots. The trail being only constructed at scale to the north, beginning at Little Stony Point. The completion of, quote, feeder pathways, sidewalks, along Fair Street and 9D to the trailhead at Little Stony Point. Sidewalks were a long-standing commitment of fjord trail planners going back into the early 2000s. We discussed that without these feeders, one could not properly measure the northerly improvement's ability to work in tandem with the pathways built at scale in village streets, meaning at village scale, our standard sidewalk scale. I confirmed that the village already had plans underway to restore Fair Street culvert and roadway from the July 2023 storm damage. Those plans include a completion of the sidewalk from Mayor's Park to near Riverview. I also reported that the south end of Fair Street, this end, the Main Street end, was being surveyed for improvements to be funded by the village's state aid for paving. I told Mr. Davis that if his staff were hoping to collaborate with the village on Fair Street sidewalks, this was the time for conversation, as the repairs could not wait, and we should be mindful of the possible cost efficiencies of working together. He reported that his staff would be in contact with me very shortly after follow-up. They were not. Mr. Davis and Mr. Rich agreed in concept to a pause after completion of the trail entrance at Little Stony Point and feeder pathways through Cold Spring. The method of construction would take 6 construction seasons, bringing the pause in 2030. That pause would allow for mitigation design to work and for us all to measure its success with actual user data. The value of, we recognize the value of actual data collected over a year or two over the contested projections that are currently guiding decision-making. Mr. Davis and Mr. Rich agreed that the 3 local municipal boards would be party to decisions related to a possible later dockside start. Mr. Davis and Mr. Rich committed to drafting a legally binding agreement for the review of each municipal board independently. They would take it to their boards for discussion, the draft that is, and then deliver it to us by June 30th. As of August 5th, nothing had been received. The supervisor requested follow-up. He and I received individual calls from Mr. Davis stating that the HHFT board had determined to take a different direction, focusing solely on the DGEIS, and that there would be no binding agreement. I reminded Mr. Davis that Fair Street was proceeding, and he assured me that his staff would follow up again within days on that topic. They have not. Our plans for Fair Street proceed as a board and as they should. So where do we go from there? So we received a letter signed by Mr. Davis and HHFT Executive Director Amy Casala on August 16th, 2024. That letter was sent directly to all members of both the town and village boards and has already been discussed in public session by both the town board and the Nelsonville board. In my view, the letter does not accurately reflect our discussion and in fact makes several troubling departures. Departure 1, the letter clearly states, quote, "We have no responsibility for the mitigation of the impacts on the village of existing visitation," close quote. This is a radical departure from HHFT's one of their primary original missions, to help manage and mitigate existing conditions in the village of Cold Spring. This mission shift is reflected in communication between HHFT board member and Scenic Hudson director Ned Sullivan to former State Parks Commissioner Eric Kulisade, dated January 13th, 2022. It identifies the Fjord Trail project as, quote, "a new signature destination in the Hudson Valley that is sure to be of state and national prominence," close quote. It is also reflected in press comments by Executive Director Amy Casala, who called Fjord Trail the expected, quote, "epicenter of tourism in the Hudson Valley," close quote. Departure 2. The distinction of Little Stony Point as a terminus/beginning and pause point for review has been replaced with more general references to the opening of the Breakneck Connector, the Breakneck train station, and the opening of the visitor center and parking at Dutchess Manor. South of Little Stony Point is referred to as Shoreline Trail South, and identified as the preferred route again. Departure 3. The construction timeline for the above speeds from the previously stated 2030 to a nebulous and surprising 2026, 2027. I'm not sure how that's possible as land acquisitions are still underway, but that was a big shift. Departure 4. A role for local boards in decision-making has been watered down to the worrisome and undefined inclusion of, quote, "local voices and interests," unquote. All members of the 3 municipal boards were copied on the follow-up questions from the supervisor and the mayors. We each sent follow-up questions. None of them were responded to by the staff or Mr. Davis. Some of mine I forwarded to Parks. They did not respond either. So subsequent meetings and statements. On Thursday, September 1st, the supervisor and I met with Bill Mazuka and our host for our meeting with Mr. Davis, Claudio Marzolo. We asked them how the August 16th letter jived with their recollection of our agreement. Supervisor Emeritus Mazuka agreed that it did not jive. He wrote a letter to Mr. Davis and himself entered that letter into the record at the Phillipstown Town Board meeting on September 5th. That letter has been shared with the village trustees and entered into our record as it was sent to me on my government email address. It's part of the backup for tonight's meeting. One sentence summarizes his position. There are some discrepancies from what I understood to have been verbally agreed to at that meeting and what was stated in your recent letter to elected officials. Friday, September 5th. State Senator Rob Rollison sends a letter to Governor Hochul, the Commissioner Pro Tem of New York State Parks, and the Executive Director of HHFT. In summary, he takes the position that, quote, now is the time for a full accounting of the Fjord Trail's potential impacts on the villages of Cold Spring and Nelsonville, as well as the town of Phillipstown writ large. This accounting is provided in good faith and with my support for a future Fjord Trail, albeit one that is modified to contain the sizable increases to pedestrian and vehicle traffic and resulting quality of life challenges, which I believe are inevitable if the current master plan proceeds without change. That letter is also part of the backup. Thursday, September 12th, the town board meets and the supervisor provides his summary of the communications that I've just given to you. Supervisor Emeritus Mizuka and State Senator Rollison's chief of staff read their letters into the record. Monday, September 9th, HHFT has a chat at the library. Executive Director Amy Casala responded to questions about the discrepancy between the statements in the April meeting and the August 16th letter, as had been discussed by the town board. She stated that the supervisor was, quote, not understanding the construction process, and that we are asking for the municipalities are asking for northerly construction first, but that's not what's being offered by HHFT. She stated that there would be no pause, and that the beginning in 2026, 2027, construction will happen concurrently from Dockside to the north and Breakneck to the south. She stated that both the bid and procurement process and the need to complete construction in a timely fashion would preclude the phasing of Dockside to Little Stony Point, again, the Shoreline Trail South. Tuesday, September 10th, Putnam County Executive Kevin Byrne sends a letter to the governor, the Commissioner Pro Tem of New York State Parks, and the Executive Director of HHFT. In summary, he states, quote, the proposed entrance to the Fjord Trail being located at Dockside Park stands to have a profound effect on the local municipalities, close quote. And he advocates for the inclusion of local leaders, quote, especially as it pertains to pausing the connection from Dockside Park in the village of Cold Spring, so a more expansive review of the local impacts can be considered before proceeding, close quote. That letter's in the backup as well. Monday, September 16th. Mayor Winward and I attend our monthly Zoom with state parks and fjord representatives. The supervisor normally joins. He was not able to this month. When questioned about her statements at the library and why they would vary so much from the letter and from our conversation with HHFT Chair Davis, Ms. Casala stated that Mr. Davis didn't understand the construction either, and there would be no pause. Mayor Winward and I additionally continued our quest for clarity on the legal relationship between HHFT and parks. Responsibility and accountability of each party should, after all this time, be transparent. Ms. Cooper did provide some particular language that we should pay attention to. Parks, she said, is responsible for development in the parks and HHFT for outside the parks. That may present a different scenario for exemption from local land use review. That clarity hasn't been made before. And we also discussed what would happen if financing were to fall through. Who would the financing fall to? Would it fall to the public? And she said, yeah, it could. So that's another good confirmation to know. So what's next? From where I sit, the headline catching promises of a dockside delay by HHFT and their subsequent walk back of apparent commitments is worrisome. The size of my trust deficit only grows. This is a massive development project that will have massive impacts on Cold Spring, Nelsonville, and Phillipstown. It's our job as fiduciaries and stewards to make sure those impacts are mitigated fully and that the developer carries the financial burden of its enterprise. Were we dealing with a private developer for such a massive project, our land use boards would very likely be asking for the project to be phased and impact studies done at the conclusion of each phase. It is entirely reasonable to ask for measures of phased outcomes and responsive design for the next phase. This is how large projects improve over time. We've built this kind of required phasing into the zoning for the village's last remaining large-scale development site, the Marathon property. Why wouldn't New York State want the same kind of prudent approach to a 7.5-mile stretch of development in the Hudson River? So that's what the supervisor, the mayor, and I are asking for: reasonable project phasing and reliable analysis at each phase. State Parks has said that all New Yorkers have a right to be in the parks. They do, but not all at once, and not to the detriment of the local community and the conditions in the park itself. Making a great visitor experience for someone from Buffalo or Watertown should not come at the detriment of the quality of life in Phillipstown, Nelsonville, and Cold Spring. Tonight, I'd like to determine if the trustees will support a request for phasing and inclusion of a phasing plan in the DGEIS. We've got one chance to get this development right, so we have to get it right the first. So I will open for board discussion.
Let me ask for clarification. I missed it at the beginning, but the date of the meeting that was hosted by Mr. Willow.
May 11th.
At one point you mentioned an April meeting. I was a little confused.
The April meeting was the first meeting that Supervisor Van Tassel had with Davis. That was April 29th, and then the follow-up was the 11th. Sure.
And looking through our minutes, I recall we had a public forum on May 1st about the Fjord Trail in this room. And we invited public comments about the trail.
We accepted comment as we committed to do so after the Fjord Trail had made its 2 presentations on route alternatives.
Right. My memory of that, and it's all recorded, there were a lot of people in favor of the trail coming to the dockside. I think many more than half spoke in favor of that. And yet 2 weeks later, you represented a very different opinion from what we heard. And so I'm a little troubled because I think you framed this as a lack of trust and a lack of an inconsistency. I think being dismissed, you used the word bias, and yet you are representing, I think, Cold Spring. Obviously, you know this very well. You're not the only fiduciary. The community elects 5 of us as fiduciaries. We've never taken a vote, whether we're for or against, or where the path should go, or anything like that. But we've relied a lot on public conversation and what people are saying. And what troubles me is that we did hear at that meeting, when we invited the public there, very positive, but mixed discussion of this issue. And then less than 2 weeks later, you're representing, from what you say, a very specific and narrower view of what is, in your opinion, the right thing to do for Cold Spring.
That's right.
But it was at a meeting where I first learned about this August 16th in Chris Davis's letter that this existed. So there was an opportunity to provide a different opinion because things were happening and there was an urgency and there were decisions being made. I wasn't aware that that process was. And I think there's no particular obligation for you to share what you're doing with the board, but it does help with trust. And at the root of this issue, as you're putting it out, is trust. So what's disappointing is that there's been a big breakdown of trust in this community. And a lot of what the temperature has risen, and to a degree that makes it something perhaps less worth protecting here, because it's not very pleasant to talk about this.
I don't know. What's not worth it?
The community here around this issue is very divided and opinionated. And in not just two ways, right? There's a sidebar, this idea that Bill Mazuka, as much as I respect him, might represent both sides. I think there are many more than both sides. And the idea is saying that there's only two sides.
That
is
was, no,
reductive.
you're misunderstanding. He was there because he was trusted by both parties.
But there are only two parties, right? By design and done without the usual notice or quick follow-up. I think as a board, we trust you to work hard and negotiate on behalf of the village. And I think there's been a great many positive things that has resulted in. Because I think we all are aligned on many things, and we don't have to question, oh, what's the mayor doing? Because you do have your best interests. But this was something that less than 2 weeks before, it was very clear, we don't agree. And there's very different opinions, and I don't think those opinions were represented at the table. So I want to see less divisiveness, more cooperation here. And that has to start with us. We see more transparency. That has to start with us. We're starting in a really bad place. Thanks to the actions that you and the other executives decided to do. There's a lot of big things we have to work on. And this one issue out of park is making it hard to work on those issues.
Sure is.
So
Anything else?
hard, yes. If we invite the public to speak, and yet within 2 weeks, the majority of the opinions that have been spoken are ignored, why do we invite the public to speak?
Thank you. So I'm happy to respond to that, Aaron. It's a bit disingenuous for you to represent that you are unaware of what it is that I'm doing. You are copied or forwarded on most communication. You have to read the emails and you have to show up. That's part of it. That's part of it. And I think that you'll admit yourself that you've been a bit lax in that area. When you are on a quasi-judicial board or a legislative board, public comment is one of the things that you consider. And of course, in every configuration of a meeting, you might get a range of opinions. You attended town board last week or Nelsonville last night, same topic, very different than the night of May 1st. Also depends on who's been advocating to get people out of the room. Our job is to take facts on the ground, the merits of projects, and public comment, and consider those things as a whole. So one night, we may have heard quite a lot on one side, and then another night, we may hear something very different. It's our job to parse out from public comment what legitimate land use and quality of life concerns are being brought forward by the public and not just emotion. So, and also, let's not misrepresent. This is not yay or nay, or I'm happy about it, I'm not happy about it. The position that I have taken, and not for nothing, you two have also taken positions, very public positions. The position I take is not a simple yes or no to the trail. It's we need to look really hard at how the trail is impacting quality of life and the pocketbooks of the people who elected us to be here and represent their interests. So emotion and liking or not liking or being popular, understanding that people like you because of the decision you make, they don't like you because of the decision you make, that's not our job. So for me, despite conversation that has happened in the past, I'm not convinced. And I believe that it is my job to advocate. Now, it's always my role to attend on any range of things, right? I negotiate with C Street. Eliza has been part of some of that. I negotiate with FEMA. I negotiate with Federal Highway. I negotiate on any range of topics. The A+ contract, or the contract for the cameras in the building. You have a trust for me there, but in this issue where we have a difference of opinion, you don't trust. So I find that inconsistent. You either trust me as a professional or you don't. Trust and agreeing aren't the same thing. So
There's
that's-
people in the reading room.
thank you. Go ahead and clarify, then I want to make sure we hear from others as well.
Of course, of course. I want to be able to trust you to be transparent.
You absolutely can. There is nothing here that is new that you have not known about. And we may not have discussed in public the details of those meetings, but everyone's aware that I'm talking with Parks, talking with HHFT, I'm talking to the mayor and the supervisor. There's no secret. I'm in this office every day of the week from about 10 to about 6 every day. There's no secret. I'm not hiding. You can walk in the door and talk to me anytime. So I find your argument weak. Would anyone else like to make comments?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know why we're attacking each other on the board or talking down to each other or explaining to each other the basics of engagement. I find that unpleasant, but whatever. We've been sent a letter, you have to understand, we've been sent a letter that is a response that was, from what John Van Tassel said last week, a demanded response from a private meeting that you guys had. All fine. Of course, the mayor and the supervisor should and could and will have in private meetings.
And bring
discussing
them back
things.
to the board.
Right. That discussion wasn't brought back to the board. We didn't hear, it was the first time I heard about that when we got this letter out of the blue. So I'm a little surprised. I don't know what it exactly means or what was said in that room. Apparently what was said in that room is highly disputed between the parties there. And it was 4 months ago. So you might have a difference of memory at this point. So I don't even know why we're having a meeting about this particular letter. Like, this is the reason we're meeting right now. But I hear what you're saying. You want to have a decision by the board where we advocate for a phased process. That's what you're asking for.
And to make that request, you and the public need to understand the context for my request. That is the context for my
Can I
request.
keep talking, please?
Absolutely,
Or-
just making clear. Go
Okay,
ahead.
thank you.
I was polite, Eliza.
It's fine. I just like
Carry
to
Carry on,
speak through my thoughts and not be interrupted.
carry on.
Thank you.
I agree.
Please mute yourself.
No.
Um,
The meeting.
Let me just collect my thoughts now. Back to what we were talking about. So I wish that that discussion had come to the table and been discussed with the trustees so that we could understand this along the process. That didn't happen. Okay, it's fine. I've been to meetings with you and HHFT's executive director and team to advocate for things. That didn't seem to continue. And I've seen the way both sides discuss things. And I find all of the sort of demanding and arguing, it reminds me a lot of when we had our public hearing on our zoning code. Like, we were here doing our very best, trying to like get through the process, follow the rules, and get it done, and so that we can move on. We could spend probably 12 years doing that zoning code update, or we could spend, you know, a couple months, but it took a long time. It was a lot of work. And I think we did a really good job. And there were members of the public who didn't like the way we did it, and they picked every piece of it apart. And I see that happening, coming from you. And, you know, it's like the other side of the table. And like, I don't know that this is our place to tell them how to run the process. I think there is a state-run process they have to comply with. There is a hearing upcoming with the DEGIS that the public is supposed to comment at that time, and it will provide all the information for the plan. This has been 20 years in the making. like we've been discussing and planning this, and the community has been involved in this discussion for a really long time. So I'm not quite understanding why this process needs to be slowed down more, other than that we, you know, that we have trust issues. We don't like the way they're doing it. We're, you know, in disagreement about where it should land. And I don't think we'll ever agree as, you know, as a whole community. Like, this community argues about a lot of things. Very true. I mean, and we haven't been totally destroyed yet, amazingly. You know, think of Butterfield. Like, that was a really contentious thing. I wasn't here for it, but I heard a lot about it. It almost tore people apart and tore the community apart. And now I talk to the people who live there, and they love it, and people want to move in, and there aren't enough apartments. It may not be the best thing it could have been. It could have been better, maybe, probably. Anything can be better. But like, this is how things are done. It's process. And it's happening, and it's going really slowly, but that's good. I support the slow process that we're all experiencing together, and I discuss this with lots of people. I read all of the emails that are sent, and there were a lot of communications today. And you know, I'm viewing all that's going on in front of me, and I don't quite understand why this board has to tell a park that's outside of our boundaries up until dockside. There, I wish we did have more control over it, but it's a state park, and there's rules, and we didn't buy that land when we could. So it was, you know, like, it could have been ours, but it isn't. But I that is not, for me, the biggest catastrophe in this village. Like, if a park happens, it's not the end of the world. For me, our biggest threat is stormwater, which you and Laura and the board has been working on finding funds, the FEMA funds that we can't seem to get. We're being tossed around like a football.
In one location.
Yeah, in one location for that important repair that is on Fair Street along the route to the trails. Like, but we need a huge amount of grant money that we can't fund the infrastructure upgrades that we need. And what I'm seeing is this park is being built. It's a state project. All eyes are on this park. There is a lot of money being thrown at it. There is a lot of energy being thrown at it. Suddenly the DOT is fixing a tunnel that has been like poorly lit and leaking for years. Like there's money and attention going to places of infrastructure that come through the lines of this park. And I personally feel that we should be advocating for the infrastructure needs that we know we have, that are going through the same path of this trail so that we can benefit from it, because that's where I think we can be, you know, advocating and working for our villagers. You know, we can survive a park, but I don't think, you know, if we get storms that happen the same way they did last year, every year, I don't know that the village will survive that. So I think that we had something more important to be battling about, personally.
Thank you. It's really thoughtful. And I'm saying that sincerely. The devil's in the details. Right? So it's just a park. There are a lot of layers to it's just a park, and how the park impacts all of those things that you just talked about. I have attempted to bring HHFT into discussions about Fair Street, and I have been told we're not here to repair the village's infrastructure, right? They're in the business of building a park. They're not in the business of solving our infrastructure needs. Now, there's the possibility, ideally, you would say, all right, as a mitigation impact, we are asking you to pay for, I don't know, I'm going to pick an example, which is not anything that's being asked for, I'm just throwing it out. The upgrade of our water district, our wastewater plant. That is the kind of negotiation that happens with developers all the time. I hope that we can get to that point, but when you have a chairman saying, we may help you write grants, that's different than I'm paying for a mitigation impact. That's, we're giving you a grant writing service.
Aren't you talking about commercial developers though?
This is a developer. Whether this project, developing 7.5 miles of shoreline, it happens to be a not-for-profit developer. There happen to be not-for-profit developers of low-income housing as well. There's still a developer. Still a developer.
little bit different when there's no profit to be made.
Well, the difference here, the big difference here is one agency is accountable to the public and the developer isn't. And conveniently, that responsibility gets passed back and forth on issues to, in my view, avoid scrutiny and process. This isn't our responsibility. Park says this isn't our responsibility. It's an HHFT project. HHFT says it's not our project, it's a Parks project. And in the middle, we're lost. And you are right. You're absolutely right that the village lost an opportunity. The village was offered dockside twice and declined. You know, you're shaking your head. It makes me want to cry. It's so short-sighted, an absolute opportunity lost for us to have that as a local resource. The town declined it as well. The town made a mistake. It was bought by OSI and given to New York State Parks. And in that transaction, we have property belonging to a superior sovereignty within the boundaries of our municipality. So you're right, it's state parkland. But to get to that state parkland, you're passing over village streets and through village neighborhoods. And we're not a casualty, we're a community. So those are the kinds of conversations that I want to have. I'm interested to hear from Laura and tweets.
Okay, so I've attended, I think, all of the sessions that were open for the public for Fjord Trail. Thinking back to the public session that we had here with a lot of input, listened really hard, thought a lot about this project and the implications for the village and what villages are telling us. And to me, I see a real desire, this came out really clearly in the public session before, a real desire to solve the problems of visitation in the village. And an excitement about an asset in the village. I think that was like two of the big things that were coming out in that public session. And I share that. I think but And the role that I take really seriously as a trustee is as the fiduciary and thinking, looking at the details and understanding implications, short and long term, for our municipal government and for the residents here now and in the future. And I think that we have, and that is something that that I think is beyond what may be within an individual viewpoint. I think that we have a particular role in really looking at that. And to put it bluntly, what I hear in my head is that our role is to look a gift horse in the mouth. And I think that we have to do that. And I think that it's been really challenging for me personally to do that, because I haven't felt like I have gotten full information about the project. I go to the meetings, I read the materials, but there's a lot that I don't know. And I think that it is information that some of it is what you have heard in those discussions. And I think that that is one of the reasons that you are at that table and advocating in that way, is because you share that responsibility, and you have additional information to then be able to bring that on behalf of in your role as mayor. So, you know, I have a lot of those outstanding questions about impacts, but also about operational plans once the trail is developed, and what the impacts could be to our municipal services. What are the impacts to our police and emergency services, and what that could look like for our budget. I think that those are really practical, legitimate questions for us to be dealing with as a village government, and I haven't received those answers. And it's not, I mean, I can't form a full conclusion without that, because I think that those are at the heart of a lot of what we're thinking about, is those like really nitty gritty. What would this look like on the ground, operationally, in addition to the visitation impacts? And I think on the visitation impacts, frankly, my concern about the idea of a pause at dockside is that I think that we will still, on the operations and on the visitation, I think that we will still see a lot of the impact. And so, frankly, my preference would be to see the project go north first, so breakneck north. I think that Beacon is a bigger city with bigger services, with close access to the interstate. I think that there's more of an ability to absorb that kind of development. And I would like to see what it looks like in implementation at in an area that is less vulnerable as us. It's not, so I want to put that on the table in the same way that I think other trustees are putting other options on the table. I'm putting that one as one that I would prefer to see as a sequencing. I agree about sequencing. I think that this is a massive project, far beyond anything. The scale, the funding scale and the impact scale is beyond anything that has happened in our towns for, you know, and it's far more prudent to be thinking about it in a sequencing way, because I do think that it is, I think it's much big. Well, I fully agree on, you know, the importance of stormwater and the everyday decisions that we are making on the functioning of the village and our infrastructure. I think that this is a project that has very big implications, and I think that that it is right that we are spending time on it.
I realized I meant to respond to something you said and I lost my train. You were asking why now? The reason I think it's important now to talk about phasing and options, and some of the options we haven't, that's one that hasn't really been talked about before, is breakneck north. The DGIS is being developed now. That document, to which we will all have the opportunity to respond individually and collectively, that document, once accepted, becomes the roadmap for the project. And if alternatives aren't included in that analysis, they come off the table. So things like Breakneck North into a municipality that A is absorbing, like, embracing the project, and B has larger capacity, that's not on the table. The option of phasing is not on the table. It's all at once. And the suggestion, right, the comparison of what impacts might be if alternatives like that, what the impacts on the outcomes might be, isn't on the table. So I'm concerned about advocacy around the question of phasing at this early stage while the roadmap is still being drawn.
Can I ask a clarifying question there?
Yeah.
So I completely assume you know a lot more about the project than I do, but what I do know is the Pure Trail plan does talk about phasing explicitly. The projects are being implemented in phases, segments. So can you tell me more about how phasing is not on the table?
What I see on the table is phasing and is confirmed in that letter. And then in the subsequent conversations with, the subsequent statements by HHFT and by PART, is that the phases go like this. Duchess, all the parking lots, everything else. From Breakneck down, right? So we're not talking about more parsed phases. We're talking about building the big parking lot, building the visitor center, attempting to draw the cars north, and then beginning the shoreline trail in two directions. So that's not phasing that says hold on construction closer to the village. It's not phasing that says hold to see how those first construction phases actually improve. I want to believe that the northern improvements and mitigation efforts will work. I'm saying show us that it works before you come into the village at any scale. And without that pause to let it operate, without a defined period of time, without a commitment to a period of time to let it operate, there's nothing to stop the roll forward. So Laura has raised something tonight that I think is interesting and hasn't been talked about much at all. It's not up to us, but it's our job to advocate for options like that. The developer has to decide whether they take it up or not, but it's worth talking about and it's worth advocating. I don't know if that answers the question.
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
Are people walking on the road from Beacon to get to Breakneck Ridge? Because that's like, I thought this whole thing started because there are people walking on the road from Cold Spring to Breakneck Ridge, and this is the train station that people use to get to Breakneck Ridge. So if there is a phasing that makes
There's
sense,
a phasing that makes sense.
doing south of the tunnel makes sense because that's the area that has the biggest problem
But their
with
projections,
safety.
their projections are that the amenities north will draw the larger crowds north. So I'm just explaining the kind of rationale that they're giving, right? Is that, and that Duchess Manor is a key section. So to me, it makes sense that you'd want to really focus on Duchess. If the real purpose of this is to focus on hikers that are interested in Breakneck, then really building out increased MTA stops at Breakneck Ridge, messaging to encourage people at Breakneck Ridge, connections to the new parking lots that are around Breakneck, encouraging people to come from Beacon to the south, right? And then building out amenities going up toward Beacon. So and then we would also still have to solve problems, but of walkers on the roads. But again, I think that we've identified that the solutions that are in the village are creating new problems that, to me, I think are beyond, they're beyond solving that problem of walkers on the road, right? We could solve that in other ways.
Very true, and we, we're also, there's not as much time as I think should be spent talking about the fact that a connection at Dockside, where you have a connection, people will try to drive, and we keep talking about the train, and it's fantastic. I think it's fantastic that there's gonna be a train station where hikers can get directly off, right?
Sure.
That's one set of people. Another set of people is people who just come to Cold Spring. But add in an architectural destination on the Cold Spring waterfront at Dockside with the money shot of a view on the Hudson River, right? What does Beacon look across at? Gas tanks in Newburgh. What do we look at? Right? It's a different character and nature. And if our job, if we're trying to get people to the trailheads, putting an attraction that will draw people into the village and not talking about, to the degree we should be talking about, how that will be a draw for vehicular traffic. The train is one set of issues. People walking from the train to the trailheads get solved through marketing that you get off the train at breakneck. But drawing people to Dockside for a new attraction, you can put parking at Duchess, and you can hope that people are going to change their habits and go to Duchess. But if someone wants to see Dockside, I'm skeptical about them parking at Duchess Manor, taking a shuttle, when they could drive in their own car to Dockside, which is the worst case scenario. To me, this has become, we all talked about as a board in all of our work in the first 2 years that we were here with zoning, with resident parking, et cetera. We talked about the goal of reducing vehicular movement in the village, right? What this project is doing, has the potential to do, is create a vehicular draw at the bottom of a one-way main street. We're a community, not a park entrance. That's what I keep coming back to. And it's important to consider where the trail starts is where people are going to want to go. And it's not the same group of people. The people climbing Breakneck are not the same people who will come to see an architect. They might, yes, see it, but there are going to be people who arrive just to see the attraction. And that's real. And that's why I'm like Laura, saying, show us that it works. You believe it's going to work to draw people north and to reduce impact on the village of Cold Spring. Before you connect us to the park, show us that you're right. Show us that you're pulling people north.
I think they will, because that part of the park will be done like a full 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years before anything else. So there is going to be that in place. I think that one piece of this conversation that has been kind of been dancing around is like the visitor management, right? Where I think everyone in this room has the same concern that visitation is going to overwhelm us, or tourists are going to overwhelm us. I think that is a common concern. All trustees here would, I think, agree that that is something that we should all be working on and trying to protect, keep it from getting worse. And we have been doing that. That's another thing that we've been working on since we joined this administration. Since we've been on this board, we've done multiple things. We put in a parking plan. We, protected resident parking. We made our enforcement really high and really strong. It hurts to park in Cold Spring at this point. And I think that everything that we do, our residents should also recognize, like, we put visitation management parking plan in, but now we all have to live with it. Like, we still have to park and pay the meters and all of that. And that made people really upset, but it has helped. And you can talk to the residents on the side streets where their parking has been protected, and cars are no longer circling around. So we have done this, like, and that plan can expand depending on the goodwill. I mean, it was pretty painful, but like, you do something good for the community and watch out. But like, but that kind of action by the village, things that we can actually control, that we are controlling, that we are doing. We're doing, we've added the tourism tax. We're gonna do the Airbnbs next. Like, these are all visitation management things. We've made it really hard to park in Cold Spring. Anyone who drives around to find parking to get to the trail is gonna find that there is none pretty quickly. It's just not there. And when it combined with what the Fair Trail's doing, which is putting most of the parking lots north of the tunnel, that is gonna draw the cars away, and that is gonna be effective, I think. And they do keep talking about putting in, like, reserve your parking spaces in advance, and I think that's a great idea, and if they do that, that's fantastic. And that will also help, like, because when you get to that place and it's like, oh my God, there's no parking, and I was supposed to reserve something, like, people's, again, it'll take some time for people to figure it out, but I think that visitation management works, and I think that what we're doing in combination with what they're planning is going to help a lot. And so, I mean, we're all just projecting our fears or dreams of the future on this project, and we won't know until we see it. But I do think, to Erin's point, it is phased. Like, this is gonna happen at Breakneck Ridge. There will be parking there. We'll see how that's going. We'll see how that affects our parking plan. And I think it's already phased.
Sorry, I mean, I'm just gonna,
Yeah.
so what I sort of feared about this conversation is literally playing out. The goal of this conversation was to talk about the correspondence that we received and what our next steps would be in terms of response. I would like to get back to that. I don't think, we don't have a document in front of us. We have not had a document in front of us to date, right? So we're all talking about idea balloons that have been thrown out by various parties, concepts that have been dallied about in the current or on Facebook or whatever it is. I would like to see the document that has, correct, that has what landscape architects have to say, what engineers have to say, what the DEC and Army Corps of Engineers have to say about development along the waterfront. This, I think, would be helpful for us to actually have real conversation, right? In a past life, I worked for the Parks Department. 7 years on Brooklyn Bridge Park, which is in many ways very similar to this project. A waterfront park, spectacular new destination, and everyone and their mother had an opinion about what should happen, what shouldn't happen. The project was like literally 40 years in the making. And it was a significant project. And my job on that project was to try to translate Parks Department, various city agencies, developers, translate what they were saying to the community. And then take what the community was saying, which was usually with like tomatoes and, personal attacks, and try to parse out what their fears were, what they wanted, what would make sense. It took a long time, like this project, right? I mean, everyone in here has an opinion, and that's great. Good on us, right? But my concern is, in the time that I've spent on this board, looking at this park and the conversations about the park, I was always sort of struck by, like, quite frankly, like the NIMBYism. I was like, who fights against the park, right? Like, this is crazy. But what I didn't really understand until kind of very recently, watching in real time these conversations play out, these correspondences sent to us, there is something awry. And I can't quite put my finger on it, because when we have conversations I feel like we're like all at the same table, and then we get a letter like this, and I think I'm confused. I don't know how, I wasn't at that conversation with the supervisor and Mayor Winward and you, but I do trust that you articulated what happened there. And I digested that. Then we had that meeting where we heard from other people and we digested that. And then we've continued to have conversations on our entire behalf. And then we get this letter, right? And so I'm concerned that there is like, I don't want to go into it distrusting, and I want to assume that we're all like in it to win it and to make this like a fantastic opportunity, but this gives me pause. And so I would like, instead of discussing design plans, because we are not designers, and we don't have a document in front of us which can tell us what engineers have said about the possibilities and what would make sense, whether it's transportation analysis or what have you, that we try to keep track of our responsibility, which Laura, I think, rightly said, which is things like, what will this mean for our fire department? That is volunteer. What will this mean for our police department? What will this mean for our streets and trash collection and getting around our village? I think those are the things that we should be talking about. That is important to us because that is our job. After this meeting, when you all leave, we will be sitting here for another 3 hours to discuss the great work that our village employees do on a daily basis, that they report to us on a monthly basis, telling us all the things that they are doing for this village to keep things going. And that is important. And that's where our focus and thinking should be. When we have a document to respond to, then I think, then we can talk nitty gritty about the other things. But for now, I think that like, we need to rein this in a bit and talk about what our job here is. So to that point, to this letter, to your request, I do agree that a phased approach, I think, would make sense. And that it should be looked at in the DGIS to see what the opportunities are to do a phased approach. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but at least we have information that is based on actual fact to move forward. So that's where I stand on this right now, and yeah, I feel better.
Well
I guess a question that I'm not sure if any of us know the answer. If not, maybe we can learn it soon. I'd like to understand what happens after the DGIS. What's the decision? Is it a single decision? So I'm used to NEPA processes where there's a record of decision and it's kind of approving something often in a full way. So I guess I have thought of the DGIS as covering an entire project from end to end. And that after that, there would be some kind of decision, maybe by state parks, that would approve whatever was covered in the in that EIS. And if that's the case, then that's my concern of that doesn't sound like a phased approach, because even if there's a construction sequencing, if there's a decision at one point and not a decision that comes after information is processed, that's two different things. And so I guess I don't know the New York State process well enough to know how that.
When the DGIS
and EIS are.
Draft general environmental impact statement, sorry, generic. So it's the state environmental review process.
And it's the big look at the whole project. That summarizes the larger project and potential impacts. And then there will be specific environmental impact studies at particular points. I don't know what they will be specifically at this point, but I would guess things like Stony Point, Dockside, Long Dock, etc. So when that document comes out, normally it's a 30-day response period. we're hoping that it will be, HHFT has said they will extend to 60. I hope that that remains the case. They can extend up to 120 days, probably helpful with a document this large and this long. People can respond to it as individuals, read it, make comments on it, send them to the lead agency, which is state parks. And we as municipalities can give it to our planning board and say, have a look at this, give us some thoughts on what you think. Zoning board from your perspective, HDRB from your perspective. We can do the same thing as a board. And I think that we're gonna need help from the village attorney and our engineers and our consulting planner to formulate responses to it, because it's gonna be big and it's gonna be a lot. The lead agency then has to respond to all of the comments that come in response to the draft generic environmental impact statement. And then an FEIS is formulated, a final statement. So that final becomes the response to the question period. It's not the end by any means, and because there will be drop down periods into specific locations, it's not the last chance. But my concern is, because it is the big overview, we need to make sure that the big overview asks all the questions we need to ask. So we're not tonight going to change the course of the decision, the total shape of it, but what we're asking for, what I would like to ask for, is a phasing plan that ensures that the most fragile part of this proposal and the most impacted small municipality is the last piece, so that we can see and assess that those impacts are mitigated by all of the planning north of the village. You said something similar earlier, right? Beacon's gonna be impacted very differently. And God bless Beacon, squeeze everything out of this you can. I have no, it's not our deal to interfere with what Beacon wants, with what Fishkill wants. That's up to them to negotiate with Parks and HHMT. We are concerned with us in Cold Spring and us in Phillipstown. So what I would like to do is draft a response to this letter that incorporates that sentiment for the board to approve and board members to either agree to sign on to or not.
Do you mind, just explaining a little more specifically about what you mean by phased? Because, part of this letter is proposing a phased approach, but I think you mean something different, right? So, I mean, the letter says,
What this letter describes and the communications that have followed it are that Dutchess Manor, Breakneck Connector, the bridge, all of that will happen first, and then we roll into decision-making related to dockside in 26, 27. Thanks. So there's not a pause period.
so, I'll just read the letter verbatim here. I mean, it says,
Aaron, the letter's in the public record. So you can read the whole red letter, please.
I'm not gonna read the whole thing.
Okay, thank you. Just
Thank
gonna
you.
keep going. I didn't mean to be,
I'm pretty concerned about my own time as well. so-
Aaron, I wasn't meant to be, and want to be clear here, it wasn't meant to be smart with you. I just want to make sure that we do leave time for comment if the board wants to take comment.
So it does say here, the shoreline trail south, Little Stony Point to Dockside remains our preferred route. But the decision on that route, the specific route from Stony Point to Cold Spring, wouldn't be made until the opening of those pieces that you just said, which is expected to be open 2026 to 2027. So there's no decision on the route until 2026, 2027.
And what's missing, if you go on to the final paragraph of that, or the final sentence of that paragraph, postponing the final decision until after these changes occur will allow us to consider the impacts when deciding the optimal route. We're absolutely committed to having local voices and interests. What I'm asking for is a definitive statement of pause and assessment. Pause and assessment.
Okay, so
That's important to me.
more than a phased approach, a pause, actually,
Pause and analysis.
at what point?
Before the decision is made to come into Dockside or any other village at the scale proposed, the full scale proposed for the trail. So that you have the northern parking lots and Duchess Manor working, and the train station and the bridge, working in conjunction with pathways out of the village, as was originally intended, sidewalks on Fair Street, sidewalks on 9D. Those two things working together to pause, review, and ask the question, is this enough?
Right.
Is this enough? And if it is enough, please don't connect the
So-
village to the state park.
So a concern that I have there is there's already hundreds of people on there, right? Hundreds of people on 9D, daily thousands perhaps. I'm sure people have counted.
But they'll have an option to get off the train.
They'll have an option to get off the train, which is gonna happen regardless of the pause or not. So. But they already have an option to get off the train, right? There is a train stop there. There's not many stops. I don't know if that's planning on getting better. By pausing, don't we just extend the length of time that everybody's walking through the village to get to the attractions? I mean, I don't
It's not
know.
their
if
only option anymore. That's my point. It's not their only option anymore. And to understand if the other options are viable and work, yeah, you have to have those two things in place, the paths and the other options. In order to test if the other options work, you've got to have a period where you're letting them work. Is anybody else following my train of thinking here?
I mean, I think that makes logical sense to me.
It doesn't make sense to me, again, because the issue is at our end of the stretch. And to keep that away is like not solving the issue.
But you are providing parking north. You are
Right.
providing a train stop north, right? So let those things do their jobs. And if we believe, which, the developer seems very convinced, and I hope they're right. If you believe that those northern interventions are going to work, and they do work, great. We've got relief in the village from what was the original audience for this project, which was people trying to get to the trails. And we're not introducing at the same time a new attraction and therefore unable to measure what the impact of these is because everybody's coming for the attraction. There has to be, in my view, a period of time when the mitigation measures are allowed to work. The mitigation for the existing problem of people walking to the trailheads, let it work. Let people get off the train, de-emphasize the village in marketing as the route to the trains, re-emphasize the vast amount of public money being spent on the train station north of the village, and then make a determination if you need to either come through the village, which is currently proposed, either come through the village at full scale, which I've seen numbers anywhere from 10 to 12 feet, right? We lose a village street. On 9D, there's a right of way of 80 feet. That's a very different scenario than Fair Street. And having both of those opportunities available is multiple pathways. Before we add another route out of the village that becomes an attraction in Cold Spring, let the remedies prove themselves. That's what I'm asking for. I'm asking for a pause and a study period.
Do you expect to ask for a pause of a specific length?
Yeah, I think that we have discussed, Chris and the supervisor and I have discussed 2 years. I don't know if that's the right one, but it's definitely not mere weeks. You have to have time for it to work.
But that's a long time before any work is done here by the project to help mitigate. Right?
There are things that Parks and HHFT could do right now to make things better, and they're not doing that, right? They could be putting composting toilets in Little Stony Point today. They could be contributing,
Yes.
Yeah, they're done.
no, real, they're not porta potties, real composting toilets that they have plant peroxide. Those could go to Little Stony Point today. They could be putting money toward our garbage collection right now. They could be helping us expand toilet facilities in the village right now. These things don't need to wait until 2030. If their real commitment is to help mitigate the impact of visitation driven by the trails and truly driven by the trails, they're things they could be doing right now. you don't need to build a 7.5 mile park to help right now. So to me, there are some really significant differences here, and being told to take dockside or get nothing isn't an acceptable position, in my view.
I'm not sure who said that.
If you look at the charts of what the village gets for impact mitigation in HHFT's master plan, there is a comparison of their list of where you will get bathrooms and where you will get garbage cans. They're all at dockside, and it's only if we say yes. It's only if we, right? And a sidewalk at Fair Street happens only if we say yes to dockside. We're being held hostage. The devil's in the detail.
Looking at the letter here, and it does say that, we're absolutely, no, not that one, but I'm sorry. It does says they're committed to mitigating the impacts of visitation. to the
No,
village.
we have no responsibility for the mitigation of impacts in the village of existing visitation. We have no responsibility. That
Right.
is
It
a
says
radical
We
departure.
are willing to invest following completion of the secret process in mitigation of impact to existing visitation of the village of Cold Spring. It says that black and white on the third paragraph, the second paragraph.
I mean, I think it's all about like where you put your attention and what you see in this. I mean, I think that one line is really unfortunate. Like it's
Super.
it does not express anything that any of us want to hear. And it didn't make sense given like the mission statement, which is to help us. And I think people say crazy things when they're pissed off too.
I remember the table that you're talking about. I didn't realize it was in the master plan, but it was shown during one of the meetings at Dutchess Manor, and it was really striking to see all of the services with all the check marks for dockside and then nothing for the other alternatives. And it looked pretty clear to me that the support would only come with their preferred alternative and on their terms. And not the kind of collaborative approach that I think we were hoping for.
So we do have, it's now 8:25, right? We have a full agenda ahead of us. I would like to write a draft response to this letter, present to the board. And remember, we have no permitting authority. There's no yes or no on our part. There's only advocacy. I would like to write a draft, and whoever would like to sign on to it from this board can do so. That is my proposal for our next step. I will attempt to have it done for next week's meeting.
Okay.
Does the board wish to take public comment for a period of time?
Yeah, I mean, I think, good folks have joined us. You obviously didn't necessarily come here to stare at us, so I assume you probably have things to say. I just think
Can we
that,
limit it?
yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
yeah,
So the limits on, let's say, 45 minutes total. 3 minutes each. We're getting,
It's a lot, too.
would you
There's
like
a
to-
lot of people.
It's at the board's discretion how much we take. We can take 2 or 3, but there needs to be a time limit.
you should also note that if that's not enough time, you can also submit
A written remark.
written, yes, we
We do read all of them. And there are a lot of letters that were received today and in the last few days. I'm not going to read them into the public record. We have all seen them and read them, and they will be entered into the public record as part of the minutes for tonight's meeting. So 45 minutes. I propose 45 minutes, and Eliza would like to propose a 2-minute limit. Is the board? That's my
Yes,
motion.
and begin with villagers.
We're getting with villagers in the room, then we'll go to villagers online.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you, Eliza. Okay, so in the room, if you're a village resident and you would like to speak, if we have a sign-in sheet, I'll just call out people's names. If you don't want to, just say pass, thank you.
I put my name on it.
Hand me the first page.
What's that?
Hand me the first page.
Oh, this is one.
Thanks.
Yeah, sign it.
Oh, there's more there.
Okay, Travis Fife. you like to speak? Stephanie Skiptunis, would you like to speak? I'll speak. Okay, if you could come up to the podium and state your name and address, that'd be great. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for listening to me. My name is Stephanie Skiptunis and I reside at 88 Fair Street. I would just like to, I'd like to speak about the Dockside Connector or the Shoreline Trail South. I feel that it's an unnecessary addition to the Fjord Trail. Really nothing more than a boardwalk designed to attract millions of visitors. And I think everybody can just imagine how big that structure needs to be to accommodate the masses that it's aimed to attract. Most of those visitors will come by car, and we've heard from many residents and public officials who've raised concern about the increase in traffic by foot or by car and how that's going to choke the infrastructure of our village. I do believe that the compromise of a trail that begins at Little Stony Point and heads north works for the residents of the village as well as the supporters of the Fjord Trail. I think that harmony is really only found in compromise, and so I encourage everyone to seriously consider this. Additionally, I think that HHFT should be compelled to work with the village to install the sidewalks running from Little Stony Point to the village on Fair Street and on Route 9D. It'll safely funnel those hikers who are truly interested in becoming patrons in our community. We don't need people who are just coming through the community to hike and get somewhere else utilizing our services. But we want people to come into the community if they're truly interested in being a part of our community. I'm a resident of Fair Street, and I don't have a problem at all with the hikers who come down Fair Street. I want them to walk down the street safely, and I want them to walk down the street respectfully. That means that they need to have services at their disposal. They need garbage cans. They need, we put out water for dogs. We leave our garbage cans out through the weekend so that they can toss things into the garbage cans. I really hope that HHFT will listen to my plea as a resident of Cold Spring and of Fair Street, who will be pretty significantly impacted. And understand that I'm for compromise.
Thank you, Stephanie.
I forgot, I forgot to mention that we didn't really give HHFT a chance to respond to me.
No, this is a board discussion tonight. Ben Chia?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ben Chair. I live in Fort Morris. I agree with what Aaron said earlier, that sadly this issue is really dividing the community, and it makes me, it's an unfortunate issue. So, and ignoring the fringes for a moment, there are two major sides to this discussion. I'm going to call them the 100%ers, which is the people 100% or forward 100% of the trail from Long Dock down to Dockside Park, and then the 93%ers, which are the ones who are in favor of Long Dock down to Little Stony Point. And I just wanted to sort of make a little chart for people just to show, like, the orange part is the delta that we're arguing. It's not very much, right? So I think most of the people that I speak to, the people that are being labeled as being against the trail, not true. They're for almost all the trail, right? The difference in trail length up for discussion is 7%. The project has sadly divided us, this close-knit community. Friendships are deeply strained and some families divided. And yet it didn't need to be this way. HHFT management didn't need to drive so hard for the Dockside Connector, and the HHFT management's divisive style is falsely paints anyone who not completely for the trail as being anti-trail and NIMBY. Because at our end, because at the end of the day, the management doesn't really care about the dissonance and strain of our community. They will, in fact, encourage it if it means moving 100% of the trail forward. In the HHFT's 2022 990, that's their tax return to the IRS. They started with a balance sheet of $51 million. They spent about 8.7 million of that pushing for the trail. Now, us village people who maybe represent that 7%, to my knowledge, our budget is zero, right? We don't have a budget to argue against this. Thank you.
Thank you. Did Ari left? Paul Thompson.
I had some remarks, but I have to say I listened to what you guys had to say, and I'm not going to sort of read through what my prepared remarks were. Suffice to say, I think I greatly appreciate the conversation that you guys had. I think it was great value for the community, for all of us that were here tonight. It was both entertaining and exhausting in equal measure. It was tense at times, but I think it was a good conversation that perhaps you guys should have had some time ago amongst yourselves, rather than in front of all of us. But I appreciate the comments made. I've said on many occasions before that I support Dockside. I do live down there. I get to witness every weekend steady stream of people walking past my door. And it's even worse at the far end of the street. I am on 8 New Street, which is just opposite the boat club. A lot of talk tonight has been about visitors. I think sometimes we seem to forget that this is potentially an amenity for residents, such as all of us here in the room. I think many of us look forward to the prospect of walking on a trail or park or promenade or whatever you want to call it, straight from Dockside, as soon as practical. And, I look forward to doing that. I know neighbours look forward to doing that. I know that some of the kids at Haldane School look forward to the prospect of doing it. So I just want to encourage you not to forget about what some of the villagers want in terms of an amenity for all of us. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for being brief. Well done. Mikey Millspaw?
I'm not gonna come up to this.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that, I sent in a letter to request or suggest a full train station at Livingstone Point, where it would have a platform access for north and southbound travel. And it would then alleviate all the traffic that goes through Fair Street for anybody that would like to go to Gold Hill, Washburn Portage, Undercliff Trails, or Little Stony Point. So I just believe that we should just keep putting out other ideas, just waiting for all this to be, come through this report. I don't even know what is in that report or what was submitted in that report. And if we will have a chance after we get that report to maybe revise it or ask for something to be added or to say that we don't agree. That's where I think the anxiety goes really high by not knowing.
Thank you, Mikey. I have to say, when I first heard you say that about the train station at Stony Point, I thought, how has no one raised this before? That's brilliant. Yeah, it's solving a problem right at the trailheads. Thank you for that.
And there will be opportunity to comment on the report. It's a draft report.
Yeah.
And then they take public comments, and then the final report is issued after.
But that's a comment, so I'm wondering, do we have a chance to go back in and revise anything and then resubmit?
It's New York State's opportunity as the lead requirement to the lead agency to oversee revisions. So the state has to review all of the public comment and determine with the developer what modifications will be made in the final DGEIS. They have to respond to all of them. It doesn't mean they have to incorporate all of them.
And maybe we could have some kind of,
We'll have public conversations around that time. You can respond individually, and this board will also have a public comment session related to it. I'm sorry that I don't know how to pronounce this name. Jen, is it Zagame? Oh, okay. You were just signing in. Okay. Peter Henderson.
I'm not going to speak tonight.
Okay. Jan Thatcher.
I'm going to pass as well.
You're going to pass as well. Okay. Tom and Pelletier.
Sure.
Hi.
Board members. I'm Tom Pelletier. I live at 105 Fair Street. I'd like to make some comments. First of all, Mayor, I agree much on your thinking as far as pausing. This is a big project. Some of the board members don't know who I am. I served on the village, one of the village boards, zoning board for 12 years here. And I went through just like everybody on the board and making decisions on people who would come in with projects. Either they work or they didn't work. If they worked and they made sense, we had a great board. We voted on facts, not on fiction. Okay, I agree with trying to get the details up front first, so we can make an informed decision how we can mitigate this. Starting from, as a 50-year resident on West Street. There's nobody in this room who's been 50 years. Maybe Johnny's been down here a little while, and Mikey. But from experience, I can tell you from crowds of people, when the firemen used to have bazaars down here. Back in the 60s, early 60s, 10,000 people. With one cop, two cops, trying to get traffic in and out. It's unbelievable. That's gonna be the biggest environmental impact.
You mean dockside? I'm sorry, just for clarity.
Dockside, yeah. The aesthetic value of Cold Spring itself, that's why people move here. Why did you move here? The beauty of Cold Spring. How much of that is taken into effect on environmental stuff? It's very important. If you lived down by the city before and worked down by Brook, and you know what I'm talking about, you come up to here, it's like heaven. There's not another place in the Hudson Valley that can have a scenic view. I remember just going from Cold Spring to the tunnel. There was no trees when I was driving the car, 16 years old. Now it's all gone, you can't see anything. But to have the West Side Highway go from Dockside to Stony Point, not acceptable. You're welcome.
Susan Peel?
Hi, I support phasing. I support the pause, and it needs to be a real pause. It seems to me that HHFT wants to begin its boardwalk in Cold Spring, no matter the cost to our village or our town. HHFT promoters have come up with many different reasons for why, including democratic inclusiveness, ADA compliance, and most recently, the realization that the river sections of the trail, meaning in the river, must all be built at the same time. There will be no pause. This latter reason reneges on the promise that Chris Davis, the CEO of HHFT, made only weeks ago. We seemingly have no say, just empty promises. I ask, why can't we have 3 or so feeder trails through Cold Spring that deliver people to the north? Why must we think in terms of a single promotable branded fjord trail? Why would we want to be usurped into a private-public partnership, a partnership with its own imposed means and goals of maximizing tourism while trying to preserve what's already here, when we have our own unique village with its own distinct issues and goals? We currently have authority, a public say over what happens, and a means to elect officers and officials to monitor and enact our issues and our goals and make sure that they're addressed and reached the way we want them to be. Why would we give that up? Unlike the Brooklyn Bridge, which is in a large municipality, this is Cold Spring. It's a tiny little place that's been isolated from vast development until now because of its geography. It exists between the highlands and the river, with only one stoplight governing access from our 2 intersecting roads. We want to keep our sovereignty. I will fight for our village, our residents' rights, and our authority of our vote.
Sarah Vamos? Hi.
Hi there. I'm Tara Ramos, 6 Rock Street, and I so deeply appreciate the diligence and the thoughtfulness of all 5 of you on the board. Thank you so much for considering this deeply and thinking about it a lot. I'm going to speak my piece, but I really appreciate you all kind of having the whole village's back and trying to make sense of what's best. Having said that, I would love it if there was a trail that we could just get on from the village And I would love to be able to ride to Beacon on my bike without ever going down Fair Street and over that, like, it would be such a huge asset, in my opinion, to have the trail start at Dockside and go all the way through to Beacon, as Paul said, as soon as possible. And somebody referenced ADA compliance and that kind of thing. That is real, and it really affects a whole bunch of people. There are people who you don't see enjoying some of the trails right now because they cannot, and they would if that was possible. I also think that the parking that has happened, like the change in parking because of regulations, has been awesome. And I think that our ability to regulate parking will also impact our ability to stem the tide of cars driving down and, like, creating a mess of driving problems. We already are overrun with tourists. I'm sure a lot of us avoid Main Street on the weekends. It's fantastic to be here. I enjoy being proximal to New York City. It's part of what comes with it. Yay, let's have a trail. It starts right there. Andrew Ball.
Good evening, everyone. Andrew Hall, 23 Fair Street. I made some of my views known in a letter today. I fully support Mayor Foley and this idea of a phased approach with a pause. Eliza, you said we can survive a park. To me, that's an abhorrently simplistic notion. I don't know how you can say that based on all the information that's before us. And Aaron, both of you, I don't know what your game is, but you're focused on an internal process spat, while ignoring many of your constituents. That's very problematic to me. I don't know why you get to those positions. It's an inability to understand the disturbing nuances of this project. It just takes time to read through the detail. It's all there in front of you. I don't know why you can't make something of that. It makes me think that you have some kind of hidden agenda. It's just beyond me to hear what you're both saying. And your unqualified support for the trail, despite all of the available troubling information, I just don't get it. It's very alarming. On the DGIS, that's not a process that you can pin a lot of hope on, to be frank. The way parks and SECRA work is primarily a rubber stamp. You get a limited amount of time to give some input. They can say, we've considered it, we've mitigated it, too bad, on with the trail. It's not a fail-safe process. You have to look to other means and methods to argue for what you want. I'll leave you with one thought. Phil D'Amato, many people probably know him. I was speaking to him. He collects cars. He's into old cars. He said to me, it's a saying in the car trading world, it's only original once. Think about that.
James Hartford.
Hi, James Hartford, 5 Furnace Street. Thanks for this opportunity. I think it's really important to remind everyone that how hard the community worked a few years ago at the comprehensive plan. It was something that the community came together. There are times it seemed we were going to come apart, but we worked really hard to understand our resources and how we can best preserve them and enhance them. The Fjord Trail is something that was never imagined at the time of the comprehensive plan. And so we have a major interrupter in something that that the community has come together and designed. That effort was then passed on to the Department of State for review and approval. We have none of that ability with what's being offered with the Fjord Trail. So it's really important that we do get information and gather information that we don't yet have. For example, what the visitorship is going to be as things come into place. So I strongly support the pause and hope that that's agreeable to the state, because we are definitely subject to their decision. Thanks.
Just for clarity in the public record, there is a waterfront meander and connector trail referenced in the comprehensive plan. Understand the comprehensive plan was adopted in 2012. So very different circumstances and very different visitation load than we have now. So there is a waterfront walkway, but certainly not at the scale and at the crowds that we were thinking about then. We were actually talking about a resident relevant path at that time. And we're in a very different place now, post-COVID and post-discovery. Okay, John Erickson.
John Erickson, I live 32 West Street. Thanks for taking the time tonight to put this on the agenda and make it a priority for the village. When you were talking about parking tonight, I kept waiting for you to bring up and discuss HHFT's RFP for parking and shuttle bus operation that they released earlier this summer. The details of the RFP and what HHFT is proposing would bear directly on business and the functioning of the village. A couple key details, like a shuttle bus system, 10 shuttle buses that would work in a search system to respond to peak times. That would come into Cold Spring, go down Main Street, go to Metro North train station. Also, HHFT's wants to do paid parking with surge pricing. So you talk about or think about people having the option to park or being drawn north of the village. An alternative possibility is it costs $20 or $30 to park at an HHFT lot or $2 to park in the village to get a quick look at a boardwalk, and all the people who would be incentivized to pay a fraction of the price for 1 or 2 hours. And the third point being that HHFT is discussed in their RFP of using the Beacon Metro North train station explicitly, and also by implication, the Cold Spring Metro North station parking lots as free parking options. They say explicitly that the Beacon parking lot, which has 1,500 spaces, and the Cold Spring lot, which has roughly 240 spaces, would be used for people who don't want to pay HHFT prices. All of those would have impacts on the flow of traffic in the village. And I just ask you to consider that and also read the RFP. Thanks.
Thank you. Those are the details. Actually, Eliza and I took part in a committee early on that was looking at talking with the traffic consultants from HHFT, and I think we both raised, I know I raised the concept that the Metro North lot is not a remote lot. It's not remote. It's in the middle of the village. A remote lot is outside and far outside. If you're going to run shuttles from remote lots, the lots actually need to be remote. And the shuttle traffic was estimated at that time, I don't know where it stands now, as a shuttle every 10 minutes. So that's a lot. John Erickson.
After all that you mentioned my name.
Excuse me, when Eliza's done, you can.
I just want to say, like, the devil's in the details. I don't look at the details. I'm looking at all of the details, just like you are. I'm just drawing different conclusions. That gives us two different perspectives. We don't need to insult each other.
Not example. You don't know that there's no composting toilets at level 35.
Andrew, you publicly called out.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we're not gonna have a battle back and forth. No, we're not having a battle back and forth between the public and the board. Andrew made his comments. He went over a line, no question, and I hope he will consider that for the next time he makes public comments, right? We don't make an ad hominem attack, and it's not helpful. But we are not gonna use the public's time with the two of you arguing with him. Rebecca, I'm gonna take village residents, as you are staff to HHFT, I'm gonna take village residents online first, and then I'll come back to you. Is there any other village resident that wishes to make a comment? James, are you raising your hand?
Yes. James LeBate, 940 Drive. I've been on the Visitation Data Committee for over a year now, so I played it right down the middle, and I'm not going to change that now. Be as objective as possible. Just want to make people aware that there are memos put out that go into the conversations that the committee has had with AKRF and Orca on vegetation projections, traffic studies. So there's a lot of data out there. And just personally, as a resident, I'll just say, in the context of spending a year in hypotheticals, and as professional as everyone is in making these projections, the opposite side is watching the concrete results that would come from seeing some of the elements built first and seeing whether what is predicted about them comes true. I'll just leave it at that.
Sorry, Celine, I've got to ask. Rebecca, I've said to you already that you are HHFT staff, and I will recognize you after village residents speak. That's it.
Consider, and I need to go, which is
So
why
you
I.
can speak with MJ.
She's also a resident though, Kathleen.
I understand, but she is
I'd
staff.
like to make a motion that we
HHFT.
listen for 2 minutes to Rebecca
I'll
Ramirez.
I'm not making it.
All in favor? No.
Aye, please.
Did you vote?
Rebecca, yeah, aye. But can we just have like a little decorum here? The point of this is to hear from everyone. I grant that you
You're a resident,
didn't
but-
want to, now you do. That's fine. You are a resident. I think you should speak.
You are a resident, and identify yourself, please, with your role in HHFT. You're not speaking as a resident tonight, are you? Correct.
I am speaking because I think from HHFT is taken out of the room. And when we're taken out of the room, that's when misinformation happens. And it has started a long time ago, right before BBC committee began, which is when the problem started. Disagreeing and destroying means you can ruin a project. So collaboration is extraordinarily important. I just want to make a few points. I can confirm that we are planning to build and open the project in several phases over a decade. I can offer clarity on the intent of the letter, that we plan to pause for 1 year to allow us to observe the impact of the changes of the first phase at Breakneck and Duchess Manor, and gather data for a year to ensure the vegetation management strategies are working before we discuss with the local communities how to progress with shoreline construction. We'd be happy to clarify that year pause in a written memo. The environmental review will be issued this fall with a public comment period starting at 60 days, which can be extended. This has all the data and technical evaluation on the full range of potential impacts, including traffic, environment, and emergency services. There will be opportunity for municipal and public comments to formally be logged at that time to help shape the review. We will follow up with additional clarifications for the board. We'd also like to offer a workshop or study session with the board to answer questions and clarify details. The Board of Trustees. I have to go to my center. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Okay, any other village residents in the room? Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you,
Good
Board.
night.
Good night.
Come in.
Thanks, Peter Hansen. I've become deeply resentful of Scenic Hudson for wanting to impose their grandiose vision on us in a way that will overwhelm this village. Their vision of a huge concrete boardwalk stretching all the way to Breakneck Ridge would bring thousands of additional people arriving by car, clogging our busy streets, wanting to park as close to the trail's starting point as possible, including the Metro North parking lot. But I've become even more resentful of how this project has become an obstacle to smaller projects that could vastly improve the quality of life for residents as well as visitors. Smaller projects like a path running along the east side of the tracks from the visitors' kiosk on Main Street, through the railroad cutting, along the edge of Mears Park, and then elevated across the edge of the tidal basin to Little Stony Point. A straight shot, flat, ADA accessible. It could be a beautiful thing, but if it's the first leg of the field trail, it's a disaster. Another example, continuing the sidewalk on the east side of 9D from the traffic lights to the Washburn lot. It's great for people from the Upper Village and Nelsonville who'd like to walk to Little Stony Point, but don't let it be hijacked by the fjord trail. These are practical ways to get people to the water and improve quality of life, as long as they're not part of this signature destination mega project that gets written up in the New York Times and the travel magazines. So HHFT looks at the routes I've described as alternatives and says, oh, they're no good for this or that reason. In other words, they don't fit this vision that they are trying to impose on us. I don't see the routes described as alternatives. I see them as practical solutions to improve the quality of life in a respectful way. And the Field Trail Boardwalk is not needed or wanted.
Thank you, Peter. Good night. Okay, so now I'm gonna do my best to see are you able to change the view so I can see who's a village resident? I see Shannon Keegan. If you want to start off.
We'd ask at this time that anybody that wants to make comment, raise their hand.
Yeah, and you'll need to unmute yourselves when you're ready to speak. Okay, Shannon, you had looked as if you had your hand up. Are you there? I think you. Shelley Gilbert, I think.
Shelley Gilbert is
That's Jeff.
so
Okay.
these are the hands raised.
All right, so here are the hands raised. I'm gonna, so that I'm not random, I'm gonna start at the top left from what I see. I can't read the name on the top left.
It's Eldon.
Eldon Parker.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Paca?
Up at the top, yeah, Astrid.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are now.
Ah, thank you. Good evening.
Derek Graham.
I'm going to read also from a statement.
Can you
I'm
please state your
also
name, sir?
Derek Graham, also of 32 West Street. Okay. I'd like to say tonight, the village has heard me now for 8 years advocating for Cold Spring against the folly of the ill-conceived trail connectors to Cold Spring. Excuse me. I'm pleased to hear wisdom getting a chance to prevail by the postponement of any such developments pending due diligence studies. I've yet to hear a compelling argument as to why there should not be a postponement. What exactly is there to lose by waiting for more information, as the mayor and her trustees have said tonight? As pertains to Davis's letter, the remark pertaining to the developer's absolvement of responsibility for mitigating existing visitation impacts is disingenuous in light of the fact that the developer has always boasted that their plan will mitigate present and future visitation impacts. The latter we must assume the developer also takes no responsibility for, despite exacerbating those conditions. The village reserves its right to litigate against the developer for damages in the future. I've heard these opinions also expressed by the mayor tonight, these same opinions, at the risk of sounding redundant. Finally, these are false promises with no guarantees, this trail. To be certain, we're to experience adverse impacts caused by these tourist loads. For this reason, it's critical that any impact studies should be reviewed by an independent third party, not one of the developer's henchmen. Cold Spring must not be left holding the bag for over-visitation impacts caused by the trail. Good evening.
Thank you. Shelley Gilbert? Are people trying to hold up their phones to tell us something?
They gotta unmute them.
Okay.
They can't unmute themselves. They can't unmute themselves.
Thank you, Shannon, for shifting your head. Okay.
You're still muted, Shelley. We can't hear you.
No, we can
Go
hear
ahead.
She's,
Okay.
she should be unmuted now. She's not muted.
Okay,
Does she not have-
Shannon, want to give it a shot? If not, we'll move on to Kelly Linder.
No, you can undo.
So
Yeah.
we're gonna mute her back.
Okay, we're asking you to unmute.
I got it.
Okay, go.
It said the host will not allow you to unmute yourself, so.
Okay, sorry.
I think Shelley was having the same issue, so thanks
Okay.
for
We'll come
allowing
back and try
comments.
again.
Can everybody hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, I'm Shannon Keegan. I live at 30 Garden Street, and as a village resident of 20 years, my family fully supports the Fjord Trail. But it's clear that Dockside may lack the capacity to handle the large numbers of walkers, hikers, people being dropped off by cars, plus those cruising for possible parking to be close to Dockside. Therefore, we support a phased-in approach. First, let's build Little Stony Point to Breakneck, make the improvements to the Breakneck train station, Duchess Manor parking, put in the multiple feeder sidewalks from the village. Why do that? It gives time to analyze the impact on pedestrians, traffic, and to our village. We can see how, it moves people north or not. We can improve the project over time and as we go. We agree that the phased-in approach is really the only way forward at this point. So thank you for letting us comment.
Thank you for waiting and figuring out the technology. Okay, Shelley, now Greg's gonna ask you to unmute, and you should be able to.
Try unmuting now.
Try
She's unmuted.
Something on your end, I
I
think.
still can't hear. So I don't know if that's a
Your
mic
mic is
issue.
not working.
Maybe your mic is not on, Shelley. Shelley, if we can't sort you out, you can submit in writing. Sorry that we're having trouble hearing you. Kelly Linder? Yeah, now we gotcha. Yep.
Wonderful. I'm Kelly. I live at 111 Fair Street. This is truly in my backyard. And I am a hiker, I'm a biker, I'm a runner. I cannot wait to use the Fjord Trail. But the one thing that I don't think we're talking enough about is what it's going to be like to have a 13-foot fence separating our town from our water, from the river. And for us, I don't see this view, which is so moving. I mean, people are in my backyard all the time taking pictures of, looking out at Storm King, looking out across the cove. It's one of the most epic views in the state. We are so blessed to just look on it. But we're talking about, and we've not seen renderings. We've been told by our neighbors, have been told that we're going to see a rendering of what it's going to look like. This elevated platform, 8 feet up with a 13-foot fence. But I think we need to consider what it's going to be like to have that obstruction in the view space and what it will be like to lose this landscape that is so precious. I mean, I want us to start at Little Stony Point. I want a sidewalk so badly on Fair Street for the safety of my kid, for the safety of our community. I love hikers. I want this to be utilized and enjoyed by everybody. I just want it to be safe. And I want us to think about, what is really, really precious about where we live and make it accessible to everyone and not blockade ourselves from our water, which is our greatest resource. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Is there another?
Tracy,
oh, hi, Tracy. Tracy Bunier. We're working on it.
You gotta unmute yourself. Okay, there we go.
There we go. You're good.
Did it. Hi, Tracy Bunier, 44 Parrot Street, and I'm here with
I'm her daughter, Alice.
Hi, Alice.
Haldane, 5th grader. Thanks so much for holding this meeting. It's really helpful to hear all the different perspectives. I have a concern that maybe is a little bit more granular. We, generally speaking, are big Fjord Trail supporters, kind of like what Kelly said, we can't wait to use it. What Tara said earlier just seems like a wonderful asset that we will use all the time. I really love the ADA accessibility as well. I also work in Beacon, right by the train, and so the idea of getting to work on the Fjord Trail really appeals to me. It seems like in the process of development, and I think potentially in response to some of the pushback, which I do really understand people's concerns, the project scope changed, and I think people are talking about the project became so big and feels like, you know, way too much. From my perspective, we also lost some things that would be really, really valuable to the village. There was supposed to be a classroom as part of the Fjord Trail that is no longer part of the plan, as far as I understand. I've asked HFT about this and received confirmation that yes, it has been removed from the plan. And that to me just seems kind of egregious. Like, if we really want this to be, like, it's happening, some form of this thing is happening. If we want it to benefit our community, we need to really advocate to retain those parts that will help our kids be stewards of the river, to foster people who are passionate about climate change, environmental activism, landscape architecture, engineering. Like, there's just so much that we could do to expose our kids through that resource.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Is there anybody on the page that's trying to?
No, these are all the hands. We can try Shelley.
Shelley, let's try it one more time. Greg is asking you to unmute.
Unmuted.
I'll sign language.
Speak, talk.
No.
It's gotta be your microphone.
Still the mic.
It's gotta be the mic on your computer.
Hold up.
Sorry. All right. Send us an email, please. Sorry that you're having troubles. All right, so with that, I will work on a draft and circulate to the board. We can discuss what's ready, I hope, for next week. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. You're welcome to stay and listen to the business of the village. That's what we get excited about. Thank you for coming.
Good night. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
So first up is.
Way to accept my.
We could absolutely do that. If the board agrees to do that. Erin has made a proposal, which is actually. I didn't hear what's brilliant. What he said is, can we other than items that need discussion, can we accept the reports as written? I'm comfortable with that this time.
I support that. Yeah.
Okay. That we do know, but there are a couple that we do need to take up. Greg has a question. Well, first of all, Michelle just delivered the financial report yesterday. I myself have not had time to read it. I'd like to put that back on the agenda and to have Michelle come in and talk us through it, if folks are good with that. Okay. And Greg had a question about surplus vehicles.
Yes, so you should have a draft resolution, as part of trying to clean up some due diligence. There are vehicles that OIC Jackson requested be surplus so that they could be removed, not only from our inland marine policy, but make more room at the highway garage. So they are listed here on the draft resolution. It should be the second page in your packet. Somebody would like to read that resolution.
I can do that. I'd make a motion to accept resolution 31, 2024, resolution of authorizing the sale of surplus equipment. Thank you for creating it. The following resolution was offered by myself, trustee Starbuck, for adoption, and seconded by second trustee Phillips Woods. To wit, whereas 3 village police vehicles and 4 pieces of radio equipment have exceeded their useful life and purpose, and whereas the village would benefit by selling these pieces of equipment at public auction, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby declare the following equipment as surplus village property and authorizes the disposal of the following equipment by public sale. Do I need to read through all of them?
Year.
A 2007 Ford Crown Victoria police package, a 2013 Chevrolet Tahoe SUV police package, a 2016 Dodge Charger police package, and a Kenwood receiver ×4, TK90H receiver, 4 of those. Be it further resolved that the disposal of this equipment is authorized in compliance with the requirements of law, and the village clerk, treasurer, and all appropriate officials are authorized to take the actions necessary to dispose of this equipment. On roll call vote.
Trustee Starbuck,
Aye.
trustee Phillips Wood,
Aye.
trustee Buzzy,
Aye.
trustee Prymark,
Aye.
Mayor Foley.
Happily, aye, get them out of there.
The ayes carry it.
Thanks again.
Yeah.
Greg.
Fun.
So we do have the officer in charge who's waited patiently all night. I thought Larry was in the room.
He was.
Okay.
Checking up on.
He just
had to come in with a suit. With a suit on, look at my suit.
All dressed up, looking good.
All right, talk to us.
I've lost my sheet. Holy. Month of August, the police department answered 216 calls. Out of those calls, we had several animal complaints. Cannot confirm that those animals were rabid, but they were not looking too good. So be careful out there, leaving your garbage out and stuff like that, and make sure your cans are covered. We conducted 34 traffic stops, issued 19 tickets. 9 of those were for U-turns and 8 of those were for speed. Another thing I wanted to bring up was alarm calls for the month of August. We answered 7 alarm calls. Doesn't sound like a lot, but 59 year to date is quite a bit. We started going through our business logs and noticed that a lot of our information for local businesses is out of date. We started going through that, updating that, and we also have a notification form that we're going to start bringing around to businesses that'll give us that they can put their information, their business information, telephone numbers of who to contact in an emergency, the number of entrances, especially the most important thing is if the building is alarmed or not, and the alarm company and contact number. That way, if we cannot get a hold of a key holder, we can contact the alarm company, let them know there's no problem, and shut that alarm off as soon as possible.
That'd be great. There was a problem at the bank a
Yeah.
few months back.
Yeah.
The power went out and it also went out for the alarm company. So there was no way to show, we couldn't get in touch with anyone from the bank or the alarm company. So the alarm just rang and rang and rang. It was horrible for the people on Oak Street. So
With
thank you
this,
for doing that.
We should be able to add it into the CAD system so that
Oh, great.
if there is an incident, 911 can respond accordingly. If it's an alarm, they can contact the key holder while we are responding to the location.
Awesome.
That's about it.
Awesome. Thank you for sitting and waiting through everything else to make your report. Accepted with pleasure. Okay. Fire Company Justice Court. The other thing, the only other item that really needs discussion tonight is just to let you know, the tree advisory board. Greg and I and Kelly and Buzzy are getting together with Jen on one day next week to review and revise the process around public trees. We've been spending an inordinate amount of time with tree complaints and they're getting filtered in all over the place. We need to streamline it and make it clearer for everybody. So that's on our list.
I have a question. Was there a report from the Justice Court?
There was. Should be part of your package.
Those are the only ones that had comments. You said you wanted the rest to be accepted as written.
Yeah, I'm fine. I just do have a question about the Justice report. We're missing it. But it wasn't in this PDF.
Oh, there. No. It
Like
normally
that
comes
one.
right after
Got a
fire.
very big number.
I don't have it after fire.
Well,
There is one for fire.
I think that was.
You're right, Erin, there is not one for Justice Court, so we will remedy that and get it to you. So she definitely submitted.
she
one.
definitely did. And I'll make sure that it's entered as part of the record. So that's a copy.
We have no municipal partners that I can see.
It's not, it's not.
Does anybody have anything that they want to report so people know what you're working on? Actually, I'll kind of know each other, we're all working on this point. Greg got the letters out to the hotels and motels and he's working on the
Amazing. I was
certification.
gonna ask you about that. Thank you.
So registration
No
form will
problem.
come back from Big Hill Inn and from Marion Sutton over at Foundry.
Anybody that you haven't heard back from yet?
I've spoken to everybody because I hand delivered the letters. Everybody seems perfectly satisfied with the process. They're excited to take a look at the return form so that they can understand what their reporting requirements are. I promised everybody one more site visit, so I would go through the form with them, explain to them what their requirements were for remittance, and we'll collect in January.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
And that packet that you pulled from Goshen was super helpful in doing our
I
own.
was hoping it would be.
Yeah,
That's great.
really helpful.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Great face.
Anybody else have anything? Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.